is. There she
Here
is.
I am.
There she. Oh my gosh! I want you to. I want to see the whole thing, at least
I know.
down,
How do
nipples
I?
and up.
How we,
Oh, body, yaddy,
oh,
yaddy, yaddy, yaddy,
yada,
yaddy,
yada,
yaddy. Don't get us canceled. This is a family show. Psych.
yada.
My name is William Bryant Miles, but you can call me WBM. I'm here with Jamilah Lemieux, and this is Wild and Wise. It is not a family show. It is an ever-evolving experiment in interrogating all that's happening in pop culture and beyond through a lens that is wild, that is wise. And today the category is Hoedown. If you were joining us last week, we were talking about what is or isn't a hoe, and so we figured we might as well have someone come, break the tie, and have fun. But before we get started, I still want to take a moment for everything Jamilah's giving us. She's giving me dark hair. She's giving me glasses. She's giving me titties. She's giving me, is this a swimwear? Is this fetish wear? What is this?
This is swimwear. I have class. I wouldn't come on in my fetish wear. This is a simple bathing suit. This is the bathing suit that I wore on to the pool during a destination wedding weekend, and one of our friends said, "Now all the uncles are going to come up to you at the reception and introduce themselves. Are you happy?" I was lucky that did not happen, but I think I also managed to duck and dart every time I saw a man who was over 50, just to be on the safe side. But yes,
girl, whose wedding was it?
Isis and Brock.
Oh yeah. You blocked your blessing, honey. We could have been recording this live from the hills.
I know they're both from good people.
But you were ducking and dodging. You set the pick and then you ran from it. Why?
I like young men with my stupid ass. I can't help it.
Linda. So what are you sipping on since you pulled it into frame with that paper straw?
It's not a paper straw, it's a plastic straw. But so fun fact, this is a plastic straw from one of Naima's birthday parties. And I'm not talking about like the last one we had in New York. Like I would buy so many supplies for those things because I'd just be, we need stuff. So I've been using birthday party straws for years, which is great because they use paper straws in California, which is so obnoxious. So I keep my child's third birthday party straws in my car to drink my to-go cocktails. Today,
and we reuse them and we recycle them, right? Because we don't want to get canceled by the California
absolutely
people, not over those straws.
No, I do recycle. They fake. Please don't get me started about them and they fake ass recycling here, old purple ass California. But so this cocktail I just came up with is in honor of you, William, and all of your fellow New Yorkers. Welcome to the civilized world. Welcome to the civilized world of legalized marijuana. So this was made with Cannade. I meant to bring the bottle with me. I should run by so y'all can see my butt, but and go get it. It's it's not a tincture. It's a syrup. So it's 1,000 milligrams. It's like a 4-ounce bottle. 1,000 milligrams. So you have to be very careful. I did not put the whole bottle in here. Be clear. It's supposed to be 5 servings. It's usually about 4
so
servings.
200 milligrams is a serving? I'm not there yet. I'm still at the 5. But
you're gonna get here. You're gonna get here.
Shout out.
So yes, I was just gonna say. So it's the syrup with a little watermelon water and orange juice. It's very delicious. I'm gonna call it the New York weed water.
But no alcohol because 200 milligrams of THC is aplenty. And we pray we make it through this show. I'm sipping on just a little bit of whiskey with some ginger beer. So it's a mule, but then I got some elderflower syrup. It's not Saint Germain. It's not any more alcohol, but just to add a little freshness. It's a gloomy day here, so I wanted something dark. But I'm also, team ho, so I wanted to make sure that everything could be nice and loose and lubricated should we get into something a little festive. So yeah. And also shout out to New York. Not only is it legal, but there's some restorative elements as well,
Absolutely.
So shout out to them for still ain't got it fully right, but we're making progress. So we've got our cocktail.
Shout out to the Cuomo whistleblowers for finally putting enough of a foot up his ass that he had the impetus to make this happen, because he promised to legalize marijuana when Cynthia Nixon, shout out to her, challenged him for the governor's seat. And she pressured him on 2 things. She pushed him on marijuana and on him committing to not running for president. So I don't think he can run for president now with all the things that have transpired
Not
in the
at this
last few
time.
months. But it should not have taken 2 additional years for marijuana to finally be legalized. He was supposed to sign this legislation in like 2019, but it's finally here.
And also, I think we have to give a shout out, if we may, to coronavirus, because I think, the fact that New York State is, kind of broke, I think also helped be like, honey, you gonna walk away from this weed bag? You sound dumb.
Oh,
So shout out
please.
to that.
I spent all my money on weed. So y'all need to go ahead and open up those weed stores and get these coins, honey, because you'll be surprised at how quickly you would never shop that way in a candy store or in a, or even a liquor store. You go in the weed store and just spend up all your little money like that.
And you would never be okay with paying 25 to 30% tax for something except in a fucking weed store.
Anything, nothing in this world would you pay that much taxes on. Like I honestly, in the tax, there's so many of them that I never pretend to even know what my total is going to be when I get to the register because they're just so high. So it's just
who can do that math?
Who can do that math?
So speaking of coronavirus, one of the things we love to talk about here is what at least we still have. And so my at least we still have, it is not tied to the category because while I believe in hoes, I have not yet been able to be one in the last 12 months. But we have tennis balls, which I guess some people could use for some hoe things. I'm not one of them. And it's because I've been able to take to the court and I've been on the court quite regularly, even though tennis in New York City is actually one of the most problematic sports ever. There are not enough courts. Oh, hey, there are not enough courts. And there's so many microaggressions and so many things at play. But once I finally get on the court.
That is where class tensions explode, is on a tennis court.
Class tensions, ability. It's so many levels. And then if you actually know how to play, it's challenging because sometimes I find myself maybe on the wrong side of these tensions. And it's just like, oh, girl, it's just because today is not the day. The first sunny Saturday is not the first time you should be taken to the court with your Nana. And, with 20 balls going here, there, and everywhere. Not in New York. Maybe somewhere else where we have a few more courts, but let the players play.
Right.
But what's yours? What do you still have?
So, in the spirit of the category for today, I wanted to tell you all about my cousin's sex shop. My cousin Nefertiti Mitchell owns a brick and mortar and online sex shop called Get Off. It's shop GHETTOFF.com, like ghetto, shop getoff.com. She created the business to help empower people, particularly Black women, to embrace and celebrate their sexuality, particularly those that have recovered from sexual traumas. She offers appointments. So if you live in the California area, I should say the Los Angeles area, if you wanted to shop in a sex shop, but you feel nervous or insecure or uncomfortable, you want to ask questions, you don't want other people around, she takes private appointments. And that was something that she was doing prior to, or planning to do prior to COVID, but now it's also made for a safer shopping experience. But you can get everything online as well. She'll do special orders for you. It's great. So shop Get Off, GHETTOFF.com.
So at least we still have I got you. I was waiting for you to pull out a toy.
Say yes. So yes.
We have the store.
Yes. We have the store. Yes, we have the store. I'm looking at my box. I just, there are so many. I don't believe in lines, but there are things that I just don't necessarily share with the world.
I don't want to see one you've used.
Yeah.
If it's not
I've used them all.
What I'm saying, if you had a new shipment coming in, we can see that and show us, but I don't need to see anything. Right. That's in there. And then one more time, remember the Change of Faces song Ghetto UT? So it's like Ghetto FF. Ghetto FF. Exactly. So, well, that's exciting. And speaking of empowering women, we have a friend today who's going to be joining us. Her name is none other than Cecily Bowen. She's a multifaceted writer, media personality, and cultural commentator with a knack for plus size style. There's a whole bunch of other notes. She has a book coming out. I could tell you about it, but I got to talk to her a bit before we got on this little moment. And I think it would be best if we just bring her in and let her do what it's going to do. So Cecily Bowen, come to the stage, come to the floor. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is when they play the music.
Hey, y'all.
Hey. Welcome, Cecily.
Welcome, welcome,
I'm happy
welcome.
to be
You're
here. Yes,
on
I too
theme.
was serving an animal moment.
Yes,
Jamila.
on theme, on theme. Now I'm gonna
Well, I'm
talk.
giving
Y'all
you
Don't be
chicken
distracted
y'all
by
said
feathers.
me.
host shit. I said, let me get in character.
Let's
I'm giving you a little
go.
see-through,
Let's go.
he's giving you
Oh yeah,
a
this is very
little.
much so mesh.
So yeah, so
Yes.
we're like a singing group, you know,
We
There's
are.
synergy
WBM and
here.
them.
There's synergy
So
here.
the last time we were
Cheers.
together, oh cheers, yes. What are you drinking,
Cheers.
madame?
This is a little gin and sparkling juice mix that I've made.
What kind of
Very
juice?
nice.
It's
Just Minute
literally
Maid.
like a literally a spark. Well, it's like it's Izzy. It's like a sparkling juice.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But it's grapefruit. Hit it with the gin, baby. Hendrix is my preference.
Classy. Very
Uh,
nice.
I love grapefruit, everything, manufactured and real. It's just perfection. And I think it's faked so well.
I just got a
So,
It's.
flashback to girls trip.
is
I was
anybody
just
actually
telling
doing
somebody
that?
about that today. No,
Like,
I
No, we're
literally
not.
told that story. I was telling somebody about the grapefruit trick today. Like, what a
it's not a
logistical nightmare.
trick. What
It's
an
not a trick.
acid burn. Like, what a skin rash.
And what a you are actually going to choke and not in a cute way once you go behind that with the back of your throat.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
It's very acidic.
that much
Yeah.
citrus is not supposed to be hitting that windpipe. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Maybe a nice little Japanese mini watermelon. I can see that working. A nice seedless
That could
mini
work.
watermelon. That I think that
Yeah.
actually would be very.
Maybe
It's like
even a cantaloupe. Get those seeds
a
out of there.
cantaloupe. Yeah, a
Cantaloupe could
honeydew.
work.
Maybe
Yeah.
Well,
even
no one likes the way honeydew melons taste, though. That's the problem. You can't use the honeydew because it
a
just
ripe
tastes.
one. The problem is you never can find like good ripe honeydew, so it just tastes
Yeah.
like nothing. But a good honeydew melon is, but just and let's be clear: are we doing this because you want like? You know, tell me if I'm misspeaking, but are the girls that hungry that they're like, you know what, I got to choose between sucking a dick and eating? I can't make the choice. Just let me put a grapefruit on it.
I think the girls just don't know how to suck dick and they have to bring in props.
I think that's what it comes down to.
Well, and there's that. So we brought you here, Cecily. We could talk about sucking dick all day. As I said, because of coronavirus, I haven't done that in a while. I'm a little sad about that. But what we wanted to do was we are at a little bit of an impasse, or an impasse, as the fancy girls say, because Jamilah tried to say that hoes don't exist. I want Jamilah to actually set this up because she was the one with
Yeah.
the problem. She's the one that's
Leave me
wrong.
in,
So I want
sis,
her
because
to.
right now we're on opposite ends of this argument.
Okay, so I understand the embrace of hoe shit. You know, I'm doing hoe shit. I'm wearing hoe clothes. I'm not gonna say I've never, said that phrase or, said I'm wearing my hoe wear or whatever. But it's shopgetoff.com. It's shopgetoff.com. But when we say that somebody is a hoe or that there's hoe behavior, that implies that there's some universally agreed upon standard for what makes something hoish versus not. So, even if we're not going as deep as virgin whore, if we're simply saying there's sex and there's hoe shit, right? Like what cross it? Like when do we veer off into that territory? So is it proficiency? Is it frequency? Right? Because for one person, a hot girl, I was a hoe all summer. They slept with 3 people the entire summer.
Right.
For somebody else, that is the weekend, right? For someone else, that's Saturday. And so if in your mind you're doing hoe shit and you're embracing it and it's cool with it, that's fine. But if hoe shit is something that, or the word hoe is something that we're able to assign this negative value to, when we haven't agreed on what it even means to be a hoe in the first place, you know what I mean? Like it's because I feel that like by me being dressed in the way that I do, and of course I don't usually wear swimsuits, but when I do wear them, just the type of swimsuit I'm going. I mean, I wear swimsuits when I'm going to the pool.
Grocery store.
Right.
You would definitely put that on with a skirt.
I would with some shorts, maybe for sure, 100%. I would wear this.
And it seemed like you wore that swimsuit to a nice, respectable bougie wedding. You you wasn't supposed to wear that swimsuit to that wedding. You were supposed to cover them cakes up.
You were supposed to have a nice turtleneck with the little key loop zipper zipped all the way up, and some boy shorts.
Right.
Well, they shouldn't have had it in
and
Jamaica,
a sandal and a jelly sandal.
Yes, I know.
So, William, what was your take on this?
So just real quick to sum up. There's nothing wrong with what we're doing, and so I don't need the whole designation. This is just you can be super sexual, low sexual, sleep with a lot of people, dress whatever, but that there's no value judgment. That's what it is for me. So if you want to call it whole shit, fine. But for me, I just want to completely disabuse us of the value judgment that we assign to the idea of whole shit.
Okay.
Well, Jamilah had 2 weeks to change her thesis. So when we started out,
that ain't what she said.
That's the same thing I've been saying for years.
For all the folks that don't know, our show is available all the time you can watch it on all Slate platforms, YouTube, Facebook. And what you said was that hoes don't exist. You were like, hoes don't exist.
And to me, they don't exist. Okay, be clear. I am saying I do not believe that hoes exist. Now, I understand. I respect the affirmative use of the word. If you're saying I am embracing this in a positive way, but like my thing is like, I don't think I need to call it some shit that like has been used to kill and harm and loathe and drive this global misogyny, this idea of being a woman who enjoys sex renders you this bad thing. And so I understand the reclaiming of the word, right? It's the thing that we've reclaimed a few words, but I also feel like there never was a hoe to begin with, right? Like y'all were always wrong about this was. What this was. People like
I'm gonna stop you there. What I'm gonna say is I believe that hoes exist and it's just fine, right? Like I think that like if we decide to get off this call and each of us go and bust down 5 people before the sun comes up, that's a little hoish, but I don't think that that's a problem so long as it's consensual and safe. And I recognize that perhaps that designation of hoe suggests that maybe there is some societal norm around how frequently or with how many partners one should have sex. But I think that to me, I don't think that social contracts and societal norms are necessarily a bad thing. The problem becomes when we hold that as, and so if you exist outside of that, you're the problem, right? So my thing is that like, if she want to be a freak and sell it on the weekend, it's none of my business, but she's hoeing and that's fine and live your best life. And maybe it's a moment, maybe it's forever. So that's what, so now Cecily, who's wrong, who's right?
So, I really, I'm Chanel on this. I see both sides. Okay. But I have to say that I agree that hoes exist. And I say that because I think as I started to meet more women who really just was not hoes. And, there's a proverb, the hoe shit ain't on you, it's in you. And I think that differentiator is so important because I do think that there is a certain level of just internal, it's about a relationship that you have with sex and sexuality. And I don't think that everyone would call it hoe shit. That's what I affectionately call it. But I do think that there are some people that just have the hoe shit in them and some people that unfortunately do not. And that is why I do think that hoes exist. I do think that hoes existed to begin with because I do think that some of us are with the shits and some of us are not. Like, I think that, like, for example, the example you just used about, like, if we wanted to leave this live right now and go bust down 5 people, before the sun comes up, I think that there are some people that are, like, ill, and I think that there are some people who are like, wait, who is the 5 niggas? You know what I'm saying? Like, who show me the 5?
When and where?
We might need to bring it down to 3 depending on the lineup. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what it is. And I do think that, like, that natural reaction that one person might have to that versus the other, and I think especially what the ethics around it are, I do think that is a level of kind of like hoe-ness or hoe shit that, that does exist and that is real because there are a lot of people who just really are not in touch with that, and no shade to them. But I think that there is a severe lack of hoe-ness that I have noticed in other people. And so I do actually think that it is important to acknowledge and name that subset of folks who are able to exist, with maybe a little bit more, not freedom because we all have freedom. Yeah, but and people who are just more comfortable with it. Like that's also just what it comes down to as well. Like people who are just literally more comfortable with their sexuality and more expressive, I'll say, or more sexually creative. I like to use that word as well. Yeah, and
So,
I think that
question
that's
for you.
bullshit.
So, question for you. You said it's in you, it's not on you. If I'm not
Right.
a hoe, anything I can do to become a hoe, right? Because I feel like summer
Right, because
2021 is about to be wild, and I want to be on
that's
some
what I'm
hoe shit.
saying.
Can
Right. And
I
that's what I'm saying. It's
perform
like
that?
on you or in you because you cannot be a hoe and decide that you want to just like have a hoe summer for summer 2021 because we got the pandemic. But like if it's not in your heart, you still not a hoe. That just means you was just outside. You know what I'm
So,
saying? Like
am I appropriating hoe shit? Am I part of the problem then?
I personally do think that people appropriate hoe culture a lot. And I'll say this from two places.
Mm.
One, I say this because I am also a former sex worker. So I'm also a person who has worked in the sex industry. Okay. And so we can get to that in a second. But I also do think that there is a general appropriation of hoe culture. I think we saw that even in 2019 when Hot Girl Summer blew up, and people were trying to say that they was having Hot Girl Summers because they went for a hike, and it's like, no, 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 baby, that's not. There was no
This is
dick
a
involved
lifestyle.
there wasn't a scam
Well,
or a dick or anything involved in that. So like, how was it a Hot Girl Summer? You know what I
as
mean?
a
Like,
gay man, though, I know some of these hikes you dip off and a good time
them
is
bitches
had.
wasn't dipping off. They wasn't. I know they wasn't dipping off. They was going straight there and straight back before the sun came down. But I do think that that actually does happen, and I think especially as we see a kind of popularization of hoe is life in pop culture, I do think that that's like the cool way to be on. But like, a lot of people not really about that life. Like a lot of people get really squeamish when they see somebody else's private parts. Like, you know what I mean? And so there is an appropriation of that. And then also, really, if you want to bring it back full circle, there's so much horophobia and villainization of actual sex workers. There's always this separation, this distance that we want to put between people who have transactional sex, who work in the sex trade, but then like we want to kiki and kaka about like running off with his cash app, and it's like, are you selling it or are you not? Like what? You know what I mean? Like, do you have Birkin pussy or don't you? And so I think that there's definitely a level of appropriation that happens there. And I think that that to me is like further proof that like hoe culture or hoes do exist. It is a thing. But I do agree with you, Jamilah, in the valuation that is attached to that is deserves further examination. And it also, because I think why you want to, I think for you, saying
No,
that
I'm clear on
hoes
for me
don't,
what it is, baby.
No,
yeah,
let
and I,
Ayanla speak. Let Ayanla speak.
Okay.
Fix her
because
life.
because what
Gather
I guess
her.
what I should say is what I hear when you say that is that you are actually attempting to neutralize the valuation that is occurring when that word is used based on whatever the perceived acts may be. And we are on the same page on that because I also think that the valuation that or the moral evaluation or the character judgment that we might make for somebody who wants to go bust it down for 5 people before the sun comes up needs to not exist because people sexuality itself exists on a spectrum, and that's not just about like sexual preference or
Well,
identity. It's
that's
about actual like what you're into.
Mhm.
sure, but for me, it's not just that. I think that you invoke sex work is particularly part of the reason why I don't think it's fair for somebody who just enjoys sex to, deem herself a hoe, right? Like, particularly because sex workers have said we want to use this word. I am a whore. I am a hoe. I get paid I get paid for having sex or performing sexual acts. I think that there's something inherently appropriative about, just saying that because I've got my titties out and I might hook up with a couple of dudes that I too am a part of this lineage, right? Like I think that, and it's not about saying I want to distance myself from you because of, the value judgment I might put on you or like, well, I do this, but I never do that, right? The same way the bottle girl wouldn't strip and the stripper wouldn't sell sex and the sex worker wouldn't do scat. And right when you go to everybody's got a hierarchy of how,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to capitalism. We're all going to find somebody
Right.
that somebody needs to be lower than me so I can feel okay about
Right.
myself. Right. So it's
Right.
not in that regard. It's that sex work is work. And what I'm doing sexually is for pleasure. Right. Like I'm not scamming, like I'm not getting Birkins. Unfortunately, I'm not saying I don't have Birkin worthy pussy, but that's not how I've chose to pop it. So for me to say that what I'm,
dick.
No such thing. But when
period.
But period. But if what if I just don't think I should liken what I'm doing to what they're doing. Like I think that we can hold, especially because I think it's important that I'm more interested in like for those of us that are not in the sex trade, there needs to be an empowerment around us being comfortable being sexual. Like you talk about, it's either in you or it's not. And I know that, like I have friends who I've seen them try to do the one night stand or try to do, a no feeling situation. They can't handle it. But also so much of this is nurture, right? Like we have been socialized not to have that in you. It is beaten out of people, quite literally, like if the whole fire or spirit still exists in you, you had to nurture that on some level, right? Or somebody somewhere, you were allowed to develop. Like I was a privilege to be allowed to explore my sexuality and take an interest in it without shame or punishment. I was also, a cishet girl who was not demonstrating it in a way that anybody could target for violence. Well, I shouldn't say not that anyone could target for violence, but for ostracization in my social circles, right? Like that's not everybody's walk. Like there's somebody who's in that church in those pantyhose who the whole is in them, but they have been not given the space to let it out. And I also think that there's a way in which those of us that are comfortable with ourselves sexually, that are able to perform it, or at the very least know that we could if we wanted to, or that we would give ourselves a space to, a way that we kind of look down upon those that have not been similarly empowered. Though we know intellectually, especially those of us that, do the kind of work that we do and are in the circles that the three of us are in, we know all the barriers. Like thinking about for queer men, right? Like, yes, we know about the hikes and the grinder, but there's all of the, especially, when we were super young, like all the young men who didn't get to have that exploratory period with their sexuality, right? Because they didn't feel comfortable with it. And so the hoe is all, if that's what we're calling it, it's all around us. And I also, one more point, I think there are people that publicly perform it because, they want to fit in, because they want to be a part of something, because they want to be desired. And that inauthenticity is dangerous to everybody who's involved. And so that's why I think we need to talk about, what I do is being sexually liberated. So what I call myself, I am a free Black woman. That is what I aspire to be. And if I sell it, then I would say, I'm hoeing.
That's what you say at the late night dinner. Be like, my name is Jamilah. I'm a free Black woman. You want this pussy?
That's what she was saying at that wedding.
I done shook the table literally. But
no, some of our friends were chasing some of the weakest white girls around. It was so embarrassing.
Well, that's another show for another day. But what I was going to say is you brought up a really interesting point by bringing up queer people or bringing up gay men especially, right? Because I think that we've been socialized to be hoes, right? Because of Grindr and Jacked, especially my generation. I think the younger kids are a little better about this because they've been able to come out in, middle school, high school, and be affirmed and actually be socialized as sexual beings. Whereas with us, all of our sexual experiences were kind of in private and void of humanity and kind of focused on the sex act, which is how you get into cruising. For those who don't know, cruising is something that gay men do where they have sexual experiences and encounters, anonymous, usually in public places, i.e. bathrooms. They're very many famous people who've been caught out there. A lot of the British people, George Michael, may he rest in peace, etc. It's a thing. And unfortunately, it's also criminalized, even though everyone involved is consenting. But I'm curious about, I just wanted to bring that up. And then my question, actually, before you did that tangent, my question for you, Cecily, was, as a sex worker, are the words hoe and whore interchangeable? Because in my mind, when I hear hoe, I don't think sex work, right? Like I'm not talking about someone who is explicitly engaging in, and I don't hear that in the negative, but I'm curious for you if you, like, as part of reclaiming it, was that, are they the same?
Well, I think that the difference between whore and hoe is actually very racialized. I don't know a lot of Black people who say the word whore. That's just in my experience. I think whore is a very white term. It's like the difference between like butch and stud. Like, you know what I'm saying? They mean the same thing, but like one is very white, right. One is very Black. And so, I mean, I think that there is a kind of like cultural, I think that the word hoe does obviously has origins in terminology that was used to refer to sex workers. But I do think that the term hoe is just more broadly used now. And I don't think that sex workers are like offended, or at least I'll just speak for me as a sex worker and the other sex workers I know, we wouldn't be offended by someone who was not actually involved in the sex trade calling themselves a hoe. Because I think the other thing that comes into play there is like there are a lot of people who maybe would do sex work if it wasn't so dangerous and like criminalized to do so, because they actually just are with the shits. But like, you know, this is not an industry that you just willy-nilly like pop into, because there are a lot of other things to consider. And so I think, you know, going back to my point, that really is what's true. Like, Jamilah, you brought up that church lady who can't let it out at all, but it's still in her. And like, the fact remains is that it's still in her. You know what I mean? Like, it still exists. Like, it's still there. And I think that is not to say it's exceptional, but I don't think that's necessarily, like, I don't think everybody has that in them. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that there are people who you could sit and ask them, like, if your baby was starving and you didn't have no money and you didn't know how you was going to get your baby some food, and some guy at the gas station said, come around the corner with me, you know, I'll give you $500. Like, I know a lot of women who are like, my baby would go hungry that day because I would have to find another way. Whereas, like, baby, he wouldn't even have to ask me because I would have already been calling a nigga up on the phone, like, rent is due, what's up? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's the difference. Like, I think it's very much so, like.
And that's the thing. I don't want to cut you off. We don't talk about that enough, Cecily. And I think, especially as we're having this emergent dialogue about sex work and the role of sex workers in our society, we really have to talk about the fact that in our communities, the women in our families, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, mamas, women we love have performed sex work on behalf of the family since we got here, right? And that, like, the only thing has changed. We have
is transactional.
So much of the sex we have is
so much of it.
Right? The only thing that's changed is our relationship to consent.
Right. And the language we also have around it, right? That now we are able to use, I think, more sophisticated terms like sex work versus hooker, prostitute. And so my question, but
that's where, sorry, I was just going to say, but we're still you're still thinking of the person who might be marketing the idea of, okay, I'm going to, you know, advertise that. I'm talking about knowing that Booker will give me $200 if I let him come down here, right? Like, there's
a lot of girls who ain't got no websites who got some niggas in their phone that they know every time I hit them up.
Yeah,
I got groceries for the week. I got a couple bills.
Surviving patriarchy. Right. And like, just, I think we should understand that is survival sex work. Like, that is important that we contextualize at times, or it can be indulgent. But I want us to, like, I think the fact that we have not dealt with the fact that survival sex work is so central to what we come from. And it was so like that you know, that so many of our elders saw, you know, okay, you got to go to the room because this person came in, you know, and no one in the community would have ever called any of those women sex workers in any, you know, in a flattering light or a negative one. It was just a thing that was understood, right? It is one of the few pieces of capital that we have, right?
I mean,
and that's what sex work is as well. Like, I mean, sex work, to be honest, it's essentially like sex work exists as a direct response to, like, I mean, I wouldn't say surviving patriarchy. I would say, like, women's survival just in general. I think that, like, I think that's always, like, leverage that women have had because, like, pussy is inherently valuable.
So I have a question for you, Cecily, and I don't think I'm the only person that has this question. I'm probably super crass for this and going to get the whole show canceled. But if you don't mind, could you just talk us through, like, in a soundbite, your, like, how you defined your sex work, right? Like, were you more on, and this is just for, I think, to contextualize what Jamilah brought up, that some of it is explicit, some of it is more passive, for lack of a better word.
I'm comfortable having this conversation now because I've finally written about my full sex work history in my book, which is coming out. So I'm like, well, I guess I better start breaking the ice now. So I've worked as an escort. I've worked as, and I just use that term escort just because I guess I should be more specific. I was an internet-based full service provider. And I just think that escort is just like a fancier word for, like, oh, you have a website, you advertise in a certain way, your rates might look a certain way. I think that's how people define people who might work on the streets or people who might work, you know, different ways. And I've also worked as a professional dominatrix. So that's like the extent. Honestly, I've done less work as a professional dominatrix because surprisingly, like Jamilah was just talking about a second ago, there is a lot of whorephobia and elitism even within sex work. And so a lot of pro doms look down on girls that they think are offering full service, girls who are willing to have sex with their clients. And I also think that there are just in the lifestyle of kink, because there's this other thing about separating kink from there's some elitism around wanting to separate kink from sex work. And so there are also lifestyle doms who actually can be very instrumental in making sure that pro doms are getting the proper training and things like that, who are very whorephobic and don't want girls who get paid for doming. So I don't know, for me, like in Chicago, trying to break into the scene as a dom was actually really hard. I felt like I was met with a lot of suspicion. I felt like I was met with I just felt like I was pushed out. Whereas like, I felt like, the other hoes was just like, yes, come to the hoe brunch, come to this. We're going to teach you this. Here's how you scream. Here's how, like it was very like, we have to keep each other safe in that way. So yeah, that is the extent of my sex work experience as a sex worker all through college and a little bit throughout. Well, not all through college, started in like my later years of college, but yeah. So, and I do write about that. I've written about it for the first time. And honestly, that was the hardest chapter. It was the easiest chapter to write, but it's the chapter that I'm most fearful of people to read because I've never talked about it. Like my family, this is stuff that like my family does not even know. I've like, very trying to ease them into that conversation around like, there are things in this book that you're going to find out about me and my sexuality that you don't know. And I don't think you're going to like, and that is one of them.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that,
You're welcome.
Because I have not, the only sex work I've done is, gone home with a guy after a dinner that I thought was kind of whack. But I was like, I guess, the food was good. I'm drunk.
But was you hungry? Was you relying on that?
Not after that night. Not after that night. And I slept in a nice hotel too. Got a car home and everything. So, life is great. But you mentioned the book. I didn't give the title in your bio. I wanted you to speak about it. So if you could tell the people what the name of the book is and where they can find it, you have the floor.
So my book is called Bad Fat Black Girl Notes from a Trap Feminist. It's out October 5th from Homicide Books, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. You can pre-order it now, pretty much wherever books are sold. And it's a book of essays. Everybody writes a book of essays. But I do share a lot of personal narrative. And I think really what it is me trying to explain this framework that I came up with, trap feminism, growing up as a specific niche of like Black girl millennial, where I really grew up in the era of the bad bitch. Like that is what defined Black womanhood for I think a lot of me and my peers, whether it meant trying to be that, trying to figure out what it meant, trying to define that. And it intersected with this moment of kind of pop culture feminism, as we all know, that happened. And I really wanted to make sense of all this feminist sensibility that I felt like I had on this side, and the fact that I liked trap music and listened to a lot of female rap on this side, and really trying to hear that music differently to look for themes of agency that I felt like I had actually lived through as like a Black girl who grew up struggling in Chicago, the child of an addict, and having experienced like all of this different shit. And so this is really like just the story of these kind of like thematic themes that I pulled out that I felt like were very essential to my survival. And I think that are essential to the survival of a lot of Black girls that we don't always value as such, like, why is it important that you can go to the beauty supply store and pull off a look in $45? Like, why, how does that make or break how you might be treated when what does it mean to have access to reproductive health care? What does it mean to have solid homegirls that you can call, when some shit goes down, who will let you live with them when you are experiencing housing insecurity? And so I was really excited to just get all of that down on paper. And so that's what I did.
I'm excited to read it, and it comes out right before my birthday, so that's
period. My book is a Libra. I'm not excited about that, but I'll live.
You could only be so lucky. Come on now. So, Jamilah, did you have any final questions for Miss Cecily before we let her go do some hoe shit?
Which one?
I don't. It went by
Too
super
fast. Our
fast.
show is too short. It's too short, but
It really
It's too
is.
short. It's too short. I just want to say that of course, I'm very excited for your book, as you know, but it made me think of Angela Davis's Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, where she writes about Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, and Billie Holiday. Yeah, and Ma Rainey and Bessie and Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith in particular being from that first blues era, right? And like how so much of there's such a rich, like basically the history of Black feminism as it's written down will tell you about the women that had the privilege of traveling through a Howard and, participating in these very high-minded conversations about the role of women in society. But if you want to get to the roots of Black feminism and how it's been lived in our communities, you look to these oral traditions and you look at what Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith and how they talked about relationships. And so like just seeing that connection between, the Ma Rainey and the Bessie Smith and the Flo Milli and the Megan Thee Stallion, which is really exciting.
Right.
So
yeah,
I'm excited to see how you pull out, put that together.
I'm very excited. I'm sad that you said it's only one chapter that we'll talk, because it sounds like you've lived aside from the salacious details, but just I'm so fascinated by this political dynamic within the community of sex workers and the hierarchy and the ostracization and all that. Maybe that's the second book, but only if y'all pre-order and buy this first book, preferably
come on now, run it up.
Pre-orders make the world go round, and preferably from independent Black booksellers. If you can order, there are tons of them. Even if they're not in your community, you can order from Black booksellers all over the country who will ship the book to you, and it will just change their life more than you'll ever know. So I want to thank Miss Cecily Bowen for spending this time with us. Hopefully this is not the last time. Oh, you're so welcome. Hopefully we get to see you soon. Maybe again before the book comes out, or when the book comes out, or again and again and again. Let's do this.
I will come back anytime to kiki with you and my homegirl Jamilah. Anytime.
Thank you, girl.
Thank you, Miss Cecily. And Miss Cecily said I'm right, so that's why I'm inviting her back, because she was this close to not being, but she said I was right, so she can come back.
Well, I made it easy for you by literally getting a professional hoe to be the person to settle the debate.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I mean, are there professional non-hoes? Like, you get a teetotaler? Do you know people like that?
I think we all know people like that.
Well, I mean, that are like, but the thing is, what's funny is I think especially at our age now, the people that admit to being like that in public are fewer and far between, because they know that there's also like a lack of social capital for being like a 40-year-old virgin, for example. You know what I mean? Like they know that doesn't really, it's like they try, I mean, I guess those people have just gotten married by now. So they're like, what I do is with my husband.
I think they pulled off what they were trying to. I'd like to see some research and study into that. And I don't mean that in a mean way, like just kind of, there's a difference between being the person who's like, I've made this personal commitment to myself and God, and here's how I'm rolling, versus look at me, I'm so virtuous, you're such whores, right? And like, that's something that definitely declines in social capital the older you get. Eventually, because if it hasn't netted you that person, and typically a man, because it's usually a woman who's performing this, a straight woman, then it was all for naught. I'd like to see the numbers. I'd like to see the numbers on all the girls that were the proud, professed, you must know how not sexual I am, and how.
Well, those were the hoes.
Those were the hoes.
You know what I mean? So it's like that's the gag. The gag is the ones who were the quietest. Those were the ones who were talking about it. So our time together is winding down. My feathers are falling out. But, we like to sit here and educate our audience. So did you have a fact, a did you know, or something? Category is hoedown.
Yes. Damn it. Why do you always make me go first? Because usually
Okay, I'll go first because I know you're making this up. So these facts may or may not. When we say facts, we use the term loosely. By facts, we mean something that we feel in our hearts to be true. Unless we provide you with the source. And my fact is just very boring, but I just had never really thought about this before. But did you know that the average age of virginity loss, right, for American men is 16.9 years old, and the average age for American women is 17.2 years old. So I guess it goes, this tracks, right? The Jamilahs of the world are sleeping with younger men. But I just thought that was so funny, because it's like, it's under 18, which is supposed to be, which for whatever reason, society has determined that 18 is the age that it can all happen. Less can happen now. I don't think you can smoke cigarettes anymore at 18, but you can
You
be
can't.
responsible for your. I don't think so.
I
who's still
think some
smoking
states,
cigarettes?
right? Who still smokes cigarettes? Who still smokes cigarettes when weed is so readily available? It's just embarrassing at this point.
And it's just like there's no it's not even cool to smoke cigarettes anymore. Like it's actually more trouble than it's worth to be able to smoke places. But that I just thought that was interesting. Like you can buy a car at 18. You can't buy a car until 18. Can't rent a car until 25. You're not responsible for your own credit. But the girls out here fucking and sucking these young boys. So ew.
Well, did you know, which most people do, that women reach their sexual peak in their 40s and men reach their sexual peak around 20, which is why younger dudes, we live right now. We're made for each other. If older dudes want to chase young girls and have really disappointing encounters, as those of us who are former young girls can recall, let them have that fun. Go ahead. As for me and mine, give me the class of 1993.
The class of 1993 or people born in 1993?
I meant the birth class of 1993, the baby class of 1993.
And they're just now 18. So
93, shut up. 93 to,
they are.
They're not just 18, you
2003.
asshole.
Sorry, 2003.
Oh my God. Who do you think I am?
That's why I was confused.
When I started bringing teenagers around, are you kidding me? I was in the R. Kelly documentary. I can't ever have sex with a 19-year-old.
I was like, talk about waxing poetic. Talk about before it hits home. But that explains why I'm getting all these ED ads. I get served so many erectile dysfunction ads that it makes me, even though I don't have that issue, it makes me start to wonder, like, do I have the issue and don't know it? Like, do I need to go to the doctor? And that's going to be weird. Like, will he be like, well, get hard for me? Sorry, we're going into fetish. But so
the ads are working.
Exactly. For him, right? But for hers, for theirs, for everyone, forever, for always, for love. So that is what we've got. We're going to be back in a couple of weeks. We have some really exciting things in store. Anything else you want to tell the people, Jamilah?
I think that's it for me. I'll just remind you all to please check out my Substack. Yes, we can announce our guests. William,
I didn't know.
Yes. Our next guest is the one and only Bevy Smith, the mother,
auntie and bestie.
Yes, and she will be talking about her book, Bevelations and Aunties. I want us to, we haven't agreed on what makes somebody a hoe. What we really need to discuss is what makes somebody an auntie. It's come up a number of times. I know the likes of Ava DuVernay and Oprah and Mary J. Blige have all publicly said they don't want to be called auntie, but I think we need to talk about why that is and also who's using the word, because I wouldn't want no 35-year-old calling me an auntie if I was 45 either. So understood.
But who's 45 in that list?
Ava. Uh-oh. We frozen?
I'm not frozen, no.
I said Ava!
And I said what I said.
Okay. All right. 50. But okay, 50. But the point being, I think auntie it's an important honorarium in our community, honorific rather. And I think it also does carry a certain weight. And I think that there's a way that aunties can be desexualized and before their time, perhaps, and I wonder if that is why that term has been so loathsome for some of us. And also for myself, I will say, and Debbie was one who told me to stop calling myself auntie. When I started calling myself an auntie a few years ago, she was like, you're too young for that. So anyway, we're litigating the auntie gate now.
I was like, I'll wait till Bevy comes. But
we'll wait till Bevy comes. Yes.
We'll let the expert weigh in. She'll agree with me again because I'm always right. That's what we've learned here. I'm wild and wise, and there's Jamilah.
And there's Jamilah.
Kidding. I'm William Bryan Miles here with...
I'm Jamilah Lemieux.
And this is Wild and Wise, and we thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.